We're calling all writers, storytellers and creators of tales of the paranormal and supernatural. Do you have a spine-tingling story that's too chilling to keep to yourself? If the answer is yes, then wherever you are in the world, the Haunted UK Fiction Podcast wants to hear from you. Whether you're a published author, an aspiring writer, or someone with a natural gift for storytelling, this is your chance to share your work with a global audience of listeners who crave the eerie, the unexplained, the otherworldly. We're looking for original fictional short stories or novellas with strong paranormal or supernatural themes. Your stories can be suspenseful, mysterious, atmospheric, terrifying, thought-provoking, even darkly magical. If your story is selected, we'll professionally narrate, record, mix, and master it into an audiobook-style format, then feature it on the show. You'll get a copy of the finished production to use however you like, and you'll retain full ownership of your work. There are no fees, no contracts, and no hidden jargon. Your story deserves to be heard. Whether it's a tale that's been haunting your notebook for years, or maybe something that you're finally ready to unleash, this is your chance to bring it to life. To submit your story for consideration, email us at hauntedukfiction@hotmail.com. And don't forget to follow the show on Instagram at hauntedukfiction. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to Haunted UK Fiction, a sister podcast to the Haunted UK, which features original flash fiction, short stories and novellas with paranormal themes. All stories you will hear were written by a collection of talented writers, authors and storytellers, both independent and professional. In today's episode, we'll be launching our haunted holiday season with Driftstone Marsh, a terrifying winter tale which was sent in to us by Jason Wells. Get comfortable, grab a little something to sip on, perhaps cuddle up under a blanket to help offset the chills coming your way, and let's dive into the story. White Hart Cottage sat in open countryside near the edge of Driftstone Marsh. In times gone by, it had been an old farmhouse with all its associated outbuildings, the home of a family that had passed down through generations, the right to live here and work the surrounding fields. Then, a few decades ago, that tradition had ended, as newer generations with bigger ideas and brighter ambitions had sought out lives away from this remote corner of the countryside. Slowly, the cottage fell into disrepair, neglected and misused as the years slipped by. That was until Caden Graves and his wife had stumbled across it one summer's day, half hidden among overgrown elder trees and sycamores. Buddleia clung to the broken brickwork like some parasitic growth. For all its ruin and decay, as they picked their way cautiously through the shell of the farmhouse, they fell in love with its potential and the dream of turning it into their perfect home. Now, as you approach the entrance to the driveway, you're greeted by two brick pillars, each adorned with a large white stag proudly guarding the way. Beyond the gates, the narrow driveway draws you through a display of tightly trimmed yew hedges, draped along their length with white, twinkling fairy lights that lead towards the beautifully restored cottage. A 12-foot-tall Norway spruce, glowing with all the colours of the season, welcomes you to the entrance of a large oak-pillared porch that shelters a heavy oak door. Set within this door is a square stained glass window, alive with an array of colours and scented by the ever-present white hart, watching on as you approach. The door opens slightly as someone inside goes to leave. "Oh, come on, Riley, please. Riley, please," a woman says as she pleads with the man standing at the front door. Riley Kane stands with one hand on the heavy oak door, torn between his need to leave and his desire to stay. He'd only been invited to the dinner party the day before when he'd bumped into Caden, but even then he had only been persuaded to accept the invitation after finding out the woman pleading with him to stay had also been invited. "Joe, I really do have to go. I've got to be in London first thing tomorrow." "It's still early. I haven't seen you in ages. Stay a bit longer." "I've got to be up at the crack of dawn and—" "Please," she cut in, clutching his hand. He looked at her, torn. How could he resist? "All right," he gave in. "Yay," she squealed, grinning. "But only an hour, okay?" Joe smiled, tugging him back through the hallway towards the sitting room where the rest of the guests had gathered. The room was decked out for Christmas, dominated by another enormous Norway spruce glittering in the corner. Guests were gathered around the fire, listening to a portly man holding court, a glass of brandy in one hand while his other waved about theatrically. He broke off when Joe and Riley came through the door. "Changed your mind then, Riley?" he asked. Riley nodded as Joe pulled him toward a vacant chair by the fire. "Excellent," the man continued. "You've not missed much. I've only just begun." "You telling a story, Oliver?" Riley asked, settling into his seat. "Not a story, more of a discussion, really, regarding the mysterious lights of Driftstone Marsh," Oliver declared with relish. Joe grabbed a glass and held up the brandy bottle, eyebrows raised at Riley. "Just a small one," he mouthed, pinching his fingers together. She grinned and poured a very generous measure into the waiting glass. Oliver continued. "Lights have been seen on marshes all over the world for centuries. Here in Europe, they're usually called will-o'-the-wisp, ghostly lights floating above the bogs. What most don't realise is that they've been seen right here, across Driftstone Marsh." He sipped his brandy. "And I don't buy the ghost stories. I think it's extraterrestrials. The skeptics will always trot out their rational explanations, but none of it fits." Joe walked over and handed Riley the nearly brimming glass of brandy. He gave her a disconcerted look. She just shrugged her shoulders and smiled. "Couldn't it be gas?" a woman on the sofa asked. "You know, from the marsh." Oliver shook his head. "That's the popular theory, yes, but has anyone ever proven marsh gas can ignite on its own? Hover at over 200 feet, then shoot off into the sky at impossible speeds?" He spread his arms wide. "No. Far more likely, it's UFOs." "Codswallop," another guest laughed. "I've seen it," Oliver said defensively, looking around the room. "Several, in fact. With other witnesses, too. Out over that bloody marsh." He pointed a finger in its direction. "Coloured lights, darting, flashing. It's mesmerising." "So tell me, Oliver," a man cut in, smirking, "why would aliens travel billions of miles across time and space to hover over a marsh?" Oliver snorted. "I really don't think they've travelled through time. Don't be ridiculous, Ross. But seriously, many believe they're drawn to places like the Driftstone." He pointed dramatically at him. "I read an article once claiming aliens are connected to ancient monuments, monoliths, stone altars. Markers, you see. The Driftstone fits that pattern." He raised his glass in triumph. "So now the Driftstone is an ancient monument," Ross chuckled. "I think it's been neglected by archaeologists and historians alike. If it were properly studied, I'm sure it would reveal a fascinating story," Oliver replied, which only made Ross laugh even harder. "What exactly is the Driftstone?" Riley asked. "Apart from being a very large flat slab," Oliver said, "no one agrees on what it is or why it's there." "Isn't it on that island out on the marsh?" Joe asked. "The Rise." "What?" "The Rise," Oliver repeated. "That's the name of the island. Man-made too, by all accounts." He wandered to the drinks table. "Could have been a burial mound for some ancient king with the Driftstone as an altar for worship." He topped up his brandy. "Or more likely, a sacrificial stone." "I think it's the Trevelli Lighthouse that you've seen, Oliver," another guest said, just as everyone vented their own theories in a free-for-all that filled the room. Caden Graves came and sat on the arm of Riley's chair. "Sorry about this, Riley. It's become a bit of a tradition for Oliver to start some sort of debate at these little gatherings, usually about something supernatural. Trouble is, he never really gets round to telling much of a story because it always ends up like this." He gestured at the lively argument unfolding around them. "So, are you a believer?" "No," Riley shook his head. "Not really, if I'm honest. I think most things can be explained rationally. I'm a skeptic." "Good man," Caden grinned, giving him a pat on the shoulder. "Don't tell Oliver, but I think it's all complete nonsense myself." "So you're off to London tomorrow?" he asked, neatly changing the subject. "Yes, first thing in the morning," Riley said. "That's why I was slipping away. I didn't want to be rushing about at the last minute. I hate rushing." "Well, you're more than welcome to stay the night," Caden said, turning to his wife. "That is, if the lady of the house has no objections." Ella looked up from the extraterrestrial debate. "What?" she asked, raising her voice over the chatter. "I said Riley's welcome to stay tonight?" "Of course he is," Ella beamed. "I'll make up a bed in one of the spare rooms. We've got big plans for breakfast tomorrow, then a walk along the flood bank on the marsh. Blow the cobwebs away." Riley held up his hand. "No, really, I don't want to impose." "Nonsense," Ella insisted. "We haven't seen you in ages. It's been lovely having you, hasn't it, dear?" "It has," Caden agreed, lifting his glass. "I really do have to be up early," Ryland said apologetically, "and I still haven't packed, so thank you, but I'd better head home tonight." "Well, the offer stands, my friend," Caden replied. "Everyone else is staying." "Whatever takes you to London then, Riley, if you don't mind me asking," Oliver cut in as he wandered over for more brandy, apparently finishing with his UFO investigation. "Nothing too exciting," Riley said, setting down his untouched glass. "A colleague of mine has an exhibition in a couple of days. She asked me to give it a once-over before it opens." "Art or photography?" Joe asked, joining them. "Photography. She's got a real eye for landscapes. I keep telling her about the hauntingly beautiful scenery we've got here, but I've yet to tempt her to visit. Anyway, the exhibition opens on Boxing Day of all days." "So you've got less than a week?" Caden said in surprise. Riley nodded. "That's right. She only asked me at the last minute. Wants a second opinion on the final layout. Shouldn't take more than a couple of days, assuming everything goes smoothly." "I can't remember the last time I went to London," Joe mused. "Well, maybe you could come with me next time," Riley said, then immediately coloured as he realised how that sounded. Joe's smile softened at his obvious embarrassment. He continued, "We could see the sights, maybe catch a show or something," he added awkwardly. All eyes turned to Joe now. She tried to hide her amusement behind her glass, but her eyes sparkled as she glanced over it at Riley, who was waiting anxiously for her reply. "I'd like that very much," she said, her voice calm but warm. The next hour was spent in lively chatter about which board games to play and everyone's different plans for the coming Christmas season. The fire roared in the hearth, its warmth so inviting that no one had paid the slightest attention to the weather outside. Caden returned from the kitchen with a fresh bottle in hand. You should see it out there. It's coming down really heavy." "What, rain?" Ella asked. "No, snow." At once, everyone leapt to their feet and hurried to the nearest window. A chorus of gasps followed, some delighted, others less so, as they watched the slow, graceful dance of great white flakes drifting down. Riley pressed his face to the glass, his expression as sombre as the night beyond. "That's settling fast," he said, turning to Joe. "I really need to leave before the lanes become impassable." Joe nodded and dashed off for his coat, while Riley offered his goodbyes and warm thanks for the evening's hospitality. After many handshakes, hugs and Merry Christmases, he followed Joe into the hallway where she waited with his coat. "Here you are," she said, handing him his belongings. "Now promise me you'll drive carefully." Riley nodded and pulled open the door. A rush of cold night air swept in, but he paused on the threshold. "Did you mean what you said earlier? About coming to London?" he asked, not looking back. Joe laid a hand on his arm and gently turned him toward her. In the dim glow of the hallway, she looked angelic, more beautiful than he had ever seen her. That familiar smile, the one that always warmed him, spread across her face. She rose to her toes and kissed him softly, lingering as if time itself had stopped. Her scent, her touch, her taste were everything he had dreamed of. At last she drew back, still holding his gaze. "Does that answer your question?" Riley smiled, unable to look away, and nodded. "Merry Christmas, Riley Kane," she whispered, as he stepped backwards into the night. He walked to his car in a daze, then turned as Joe called out before closing the door. "What?" he shouted back, not quite catching her words. "Please drive carefully." "Always," he replied, lifting a hand in farewell. Joe closed the door gently, leaving him alone in the snow. It was the sound of the door closing that woke him from his daydream. Snow fell heavily but silently all around, like icy ghosts drifting toward the ground in a graceful dance, slowly building a world of white. The snowfall was mesmerizing, but he quickly reminded himself that he had to reach the main road, and fast. He unlocked the car door and brushed snow from the side window. Just as his hand touched the handle, he heard a whisper. "Riley." He glanced back at the house, thinking Joe might have returned to the door, but no one was there. Looking up the driveway, all he could see was snow settling on the twinkling lights strung along the hedge. He tried the handle again. "Riley." "Hello?" Riley called, but there was no reply. He looked nervously around, then back toward the house where the Christmas lights glowing in the windows spilled warmth into the ever-increasing blanket of white. For a moment, he thought about returning and taking the Graves up on their offer to stay the night, but a rustling near the gate snapped his attention back to the shrubs. He stared hard into the shadows. "Hello," he called again, his mind racing to rationalize the sound. His eyes fixed on the lane beyond the white stags of the gateway. Nothing stirred. The world was still, muffled in the silence of snow. Riley gave a shaky laugh, realizing how foolish he must look. Composing himself, he climbed into the car and turned the key. The radio burst into life, announcing that unexpected snowfall had arrived in the area. "No shit," Riley muttered, then groaned when Let It Snow began to play. He cranked the heater to full and set the wipers to work on the snow-covered windscreen. Within minutes the glass was clear, and he eased the car toward the gateway. The headlights cut into the darkness that had unnerved him moments before, illuminating two shining eyes. They blinked at him, briefly before vanishing through the hedge into the field. "A bloody hare," he said, shaking his head. Laughing at his own nerves, he turned into the lane, relieved to be moving at last. Just 3 miles to the main road, then clearer roads and home. The snow showed no sign of easing. Several inches had already buried the surrounding countryside, though Riley barely noticed. His eyes strained to see beyond the car headlights, which struggled to cut through the swirling white. The flakes danced in the beams, flashing briefly before drifting down to settle on the narrow lane. It was a twisting road, hemmed in by hedgerows, with the occasional pull-in for cars to pass each other. Slow going at the best of times, but with this weather, and his unfamiliarity with the area, progress was painfully slow. Inside the car, Riley grew increasingly anxious. Doubts gnawed at him. Should he have left the house at all? Without realizing, his unease had pressed his foot harder on the accelerator. Suddenly, through a veil of snow, a junction appeared. He braked sharply, the wheels locked, skidding across the slick road as the car slid forward. "Shit!" he gasped as the vehicle shuddered to a stop, just beyond the turning. Heart pounding, he exhaled a shaky breath and forced himself to look left, then right. Nothing. No headlights, no shapes, nothing at all. Who else would be out here on a night like this? He was about to move off when something caught his eye. A flicker of movement in the field opposite. A dark shape, large, powerful, tearing across the snow. He couldn't tell what it was, only that it moved fast until it vanished into the swirling snow and the ink-black night beyond. "What the hell?" Riley muttered. He rubbed condensation from the windscreen, but it made no difference. Muttering a curse, he shoved the door open and stood half in, half out, peering across the hedgerow. The night pressed close, thick with falling snow. Then it came. A cry, distant yet piercing, splintered the silence. Not human, not animal, not anything he knew. Guttural, unnatural. Riley jolted violently, stumbling back into the car. His hands fumbled the gear stick before the wheels spun, throwing him down the lane once more. "Oh my God," he stammered, glancing into the mirrors, desperate for a sign of pursuit. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one fogging the cabin as the speedometer climbed. On the radio, the announcer advised listeners to avoid all unnecessary travel in the worsening weather. Riley let out a strained laugh. Too late for that. He eased off the accelerator, trying to steady his racing pulse. His mind flickered at Joe, back at the house, safe, warm, perhaps laughing over cards with the others or sipping hot chocolate. No one there was worrying about the deepening snow. No one was seeing things racing across the fields or hearing cries like that. It was a stag, he told himself firmly. Yeah, definitely a stag. He repeated it again as he wiped the windscreen, though it was already clear. His vision wasn't going to improve. The tires crunched over the compacted snow, leaving fleeting ghostly tracks. But within minutes, even those faint signs of his passing were swallowed whole by the relentless fall of white. As he continued, the tires struggled to grip the thickening mat of snow, and the car began to slide occasionally as it crawled along the lane. The headlights probed into the darkness around each bend, always searching for the road ahead. Riley knew he was making progress, slow admittedly, but still moving toward the main road and the clear path home. He breathed a visible sigh of relief as he rounded yet another bend and Blackwater Bridge came into view. The old Packhorse Bridge was narrow, its low parapet running along either side, but its presence meant the main road was close. Suddenly, two glowing red eyes stared at him through the gloom from the far side of the bridge. Riley's eyes widened as a huge dark shape loomed into view, silhouetted against the falling snow. An animal, though none he could imagine being this large. Its breath plumed in the cold, curling white around those burning eyes. He slammed on the brakes in sheer panic. The tires lost grip almost instantly, the car veering sideways toward the parapet. "Shit!" he cried as the car smashed into the wall and jolted to an abrupt stop. Heart pounding, Riley sat frozen for a moment before daring a nervous look across the bridge. The creature was gone. Only the slow descent of snowflakes filled the void where it had stood. What the hell was that? He muttered, unable to form a logical conclusion. He hurriedly slipped the car into reverse, but it refused to move. Pressing the accelerator only spun the rear tires harder on the ice. The car was stuck fast. "Shit! Shit! Shit!" he cried, slamming his hands against the steering wheel. Climbing out, he scanned the lane warily before turning to the damage. The front wheel hung precariously over the edge of the bridge. The car was perched on what remained of the parapet, its weight lifted clear of the ground. Desperate, he tried rocking the front, pushing against the bonnet, but after several failed attempts, he collapsed against it, breath steaming in the cold. Below, the brook wound its way through the trees. Dark branches arched overhead like twisted ribs, shielding the water in a protective embrace. The white snow shone brilliantly against the black surface, where each drifting flake vanished as it touched the stream. Riley climbed back inside and tried again, but the car didn't budge. He knew his phone would be useless. This area was a notorious dead zone. Yet disappointment still washed over him when the blank signal bar confirmed it. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and sat in silence, weighing his choices. The engine hummed, the heater spilling warmth around him. What should I do, he thought. I could walk back to the house, be warm with Joe. Yes, go back, be with Joe, and sort this out tomorrow morning. Being late for the London job isn't the end of the world, is it? There are many more important things in life. Why did I even leave? "Get up," a voice suddenly blurted, tearing through his thoughts. "Get up and get out," it urged again. Riley jerked upright until the car radio burst to life. Get up and get out this Christmas and enjoy a shopping experience like no other at Bellevue Garden Centre, the advert sang over the fan's whine. He twisted the key, silencing the engine, the heater, and the cheerfully oblivious radio. The sudden quiet left him uneasy. The noise he'd heard earlier, the hulking beast on the bridge, echoed in his mind, mingling with the memory of those burning eyes. It couldn't have been real, could it? The thought of the 2-mile walk back to White Hart Cottage filled him with dread, but any hope of pressing forward was gone. He pulled his hat and scarf from the passenger seat, bundled up tightly, and stepped out into the silent, snow-filled night. Blackwater Brook trickled faintly under the bridge as he zipped his coat to his chin. With one last look at his stranded car, Riley locked it and turned back the way he had come. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he slipped silently on the ice where his wheels had spun. Steadying himself against the parapet, he drew in a deep breath and began his trek back through the white, toward the cottage, the darkness closing in around him. The world was eerily silent. Not a breath of wind stirred the trees. Only the heavy snow fell, drifting through the air in search of somewhere to settle. After a while, he stopped to stamp his feet, the cold biting through footwear never meant for snow. As he moved, his phone lit up under his jacket. 12:25 a.m. The new day had begun without him even noticing. Still no signal. Surely there had to be some out there. Shaking his head, he tucked the phone back into his pocket and walked on, oddly reassured by the slow, steady crunch of snow beneath his boots. "Riley!" A call came from the distance, not shouted, more as if carried on the wind, though there was none. He spun round. "Hello?" he called, fear and hope colliding. His eyes searched frantically through the curtain of falling snow, but no one was there. "Hello?" No reply came. Then the crunch of footsteps. Slow. Approaching. Riley's eyes locked on the path behind him, straining to see through the shifting veil of white. "Who's there?" he demanded, panic curling through him as he turned this way and that. "Riley." The voice came again, muffled, closer. The snow crunched in time with it. Someone should have been visible by now. His chest tightened. His gaze darted desperately, searching. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Dreadful silence. And then a whisper, cold on his ear, breath he could feel. "Riley Kane." His body reacted before his mind could. He ran, heart hammering, breath ragged, the night twisted around him. The trees seemed to lean in, reaching for him. He didn't dare look back. Something had been right beside him. He'd felt its icy breath. The cry, the shape in the field, the footsteps. He could almost have explained those away, but that whisper could not have been imagined. He rounded a corner, through the hedgerow a glimmer of light. Relief washed through him like a sudden blanket of warmth. Stumbling into the snow-covered verge, he dropped to one knee and stared across the field. Snow clung to his shoulders and hat like clutching fingers. His clothes were soaked through, but he felt none of it as he fixed his eyes on the glow. White Hart Cottage. It had to be. Safety. Warmth. Nothing moved on the road behind him. Hauling himself up, he pushed through the hedge into the field. Long strands of dead grass pierced the drifts. The openness unsettled him. The hedgerows, claustrophobic before, now seemed a kind of protection. He pressed on, stumbling in the deep snow. He swung his arms across his chest to keep him warm, teeth chattering. Then the light vanished. Panic flared until he spotted it again, further to his left. He shook his head. He must be walking crooked. He adjusted course and carried on, never realizing the light had moved. Minutes passed, the glow always just ahead, always leading. Then, movement. Heavy, running, off to his right. His breath hitched. Something was crossing the field with him, closing in. He stumbled back, fell hard into the snow. Cursing, he scrambled up and ran. His own footfalls thundered in his ears, drowning the pursuit. The light bobbed ahead, peeking through the trees. Home. Safety. A shallow hollow caught his foot, and he crashed to his knees. Flailing at the snow, he hauled himself up and kept going, terror propelling him. He risked a glance sideways, straining to hear. Nothing but his own desperate breaths. Then it came. The cry. The same he'd heard before. Closer now. Deafening. Inhuman. Not a stag. Not anything of this world. It came again. A sound that could unnerve a man in daylight, let alone on this frozen, God-forsaken night. He finally reached the far edge of the field and dropped into a shallow ditch beneath the hedgerow. His breath became hard and fast, and he fought to steady it, pressing a wet-gloved hand over his mouth so no sound could betray him. Then, snow crunched. A heavy step. Riley froze, eyes wide. Breathing followed, but not human. It wasn't ragged or laboured. It was deep, deliberate, drawn out, like some vast creature tasting the night air for a trace of him. Another step landed above his head, 10 feet further on. But how? He'd heard no others in between. A shiver ran through him. Cold, fear, he couldn't tell, but he pressed his hand tighter against his mouth to smother even the faintest whimper. The breathing came again, long and low. Then silence returned. broken only by his heart battering in his chest like a madman trying to escape. Minutes dragged by. Snow fell. Nothing stirred. At last, mustering courage, Riley shifted and peered through the branches, every nerve straining for the thing he was certain he'd heard. He pushed himself up out of the ditch. The light greeted him like an old friend, closer now, within reach, yet he dared not rush forward. A cry split the night, high, terrible. He froze. This time it came from far off, thin with distance, tinged with something like despair. Again it sounded fainter still, as if the creature were moving away. Riley edged out further and leaned against a nearby tree. The glow still beckoned. Nothing lay between him and it but flat, snow-blanketed ground. He scrambled up a nearby bank, 12 feet higher than the land behind. From the top, he saw the field he'd crossed, empty now, stretching away into the night. Ahead lay a sea of mist clinging to the earth, dense and white, unbroken but for one small rise of ground jutting above it like an island in a ghostly ocean. Beyond it, just visible through the drifting flakes, shone the cottage light. So close he almost fancied he could hear the muffled echoes of laughter within. He stared down into the mist, transfixed as the snow vanished into its depths. His first step felt unreal, as though he were watching someone else take it. A few more, and the mist closed around him. Then he was gone, swallowed by the shroud. His feet struck shallow water almost at once, the icy chill cutting through his shoes and wrapping around his already frozen toes. Visibility was no more than 20 feet in any direction, but he could just make out a wooden post jutting from the sodden ground, a frayed length of rope dangling from its top. He laid a hand on it as his eyes adjusted and saw another post further ahead. Without thinking, he moved towards it, deeper into the mist-filled night, never realizing he had stepped onto Driftstone Marsh, where the snow no longer fell. The silence was startling after the chase of only minutes before. Here it was different, ethereal, dreamlike. The posts marked out a path, though Riley gave no thought to such things. His only focus was White Hart Cottage. The mist swirled around him in slow, fluid motions, flowing like a stream in the same direction as the path, drawing him onward almost against his will. Then he heard them. Whispers carried on the fog. At first faint, then closer. Quiet voices drifting past as though walking the path in the opposite direction. He strained to catch the words, but they slipped away, lost to the shifting mist and the sucking bog beneath his feet. The sound should have unnerved him, yet it didn't. He couldn't have said why. He trudged on, never noticing the water creeping higher, the tide rolling gently over the marsh. The whispers clung to him like insects, buzzing, brushing at his ears. Still, his thoughts never strayed from the cottage and the safety it promised. The icy water reached his knees now. He was sure he could hear the faint music of the party. "Riley!" A gentle voice called through the mist ahead. "I'm here," he answered at once, quickening his pace. The whispers behind him rose in soft despair before fading into the dark fog. Riley pressed on with new urgency. "I'm here!" he cried again, but his words dissolved into the veil. The ground began to rise beneath his feet now. He stepped out of the deepening water and climbed a low bank. Emerging from the mist was like stepping between worlds. Snowflakes kissed his face again as he broke free into the open night, standing on the island he had glimpsed earlier from across the way. Behind him, the marsh stretched away into swirling mist, the bank he had left now barely visible. He turned in search of the cottage light, but nothing stirred in the snow. A mound of white loomed at the island's centre, unnaturally large. Riley approached, crouched, and swept at it with his arms. Snow scattered in clumps until grey stone emerged beneath. Flat, weathered, vast, its surface scarred with deep ancient cuts. The driftstone. "I'm on the rise," he whispered. But how?" He turned in circles, searching the dark. "The cottage. It was here. It was here!" His voice rang out into the silence. The beastly cry called again in the distance, as if answering his call. The sound crept across the marsh. Angry, desperate, menacing. It came from the bank where he'd entered, and as Riley looked back, he saw it. The same hulking black shape he'd glimpsed at Blackwater Bridge. Snow blurred its form, but he could see enough. A great four-legged beast. Red eyes burned through the snow like embers in a dying fire. Panic clawed at him. It wouldn't take long for such a creature to reach him. But it did not move. It only stood there, staring, as though held back by an unseen barrier. The mist over the marsh began to stir with an eerie light. Tiny spheres of brilliance flickered within, like swarms of fireflies. They pressed against the fog's edge but could not escape. Their glow crowned the rise in a ghostly halo, and then the mass began to crawl up the bank toward him. Riley's breath caught. The mist moved like a living thing, whispering with the sound of sorrowful moans. The beast still watched, motionless, the light glancing off its black matted coat. Steam rose from its jaws, teeth glinting in the glow. Riley backed to the centre of the rise and stepped onto the driftstone. The mist crept closer. Within its veil, the lights darted in agitation, like predators scenting prey. Ghostly arms tore through the fog, reaching. Voices called his name. "Leave me alone!" he screamed. The mist closed in. Pale hands clawed toward him, grasping, clutching. The lights danced wildly, feeding on his terror. Riley spun in every direction. No escape. Cold fingers seized him. His cry was lost as the mist engulfed him. Across the marsh the beast watched. The scream dwindled, swallowed by the fog. The marsh glowed like a boiling cauldron, the lights pulsing madly. The creature sighed, a heavy sound, white breath curling in the frozen air. Slowly, the mist calmed and withdrew, flowing like water back into the tidal creeks. They lit up the glowing veins, pulsing with some dark, ominous heartbeat, every current leading back to the rise, the driftstone. Then the light ebbed, slowly vanishing into black water. Riley Kane lay lifeless upon the driftstone, his eyes wide and breath stilled in the frozen air. The beast turned away. Snow clung to its heavy coat, unwilling to release it. Step by step, it vanished into the gently falling snow, letting out one final anguished cry before silence reclaimed the night. And that brings us to the end of this episode. We truly hope you enjoyed this terrifying tale, graciously sent in to us by Jason Wells. Contact information for Jason can be found in the show's notes. If you have an original story that would send a chill down our spines, and you would like to submit it for review, simply send it in to hauntedukfiction@hotmail.com. That's hauntedukfiction@hotmail.com. Until next time, stay safe and take care.